Why do you hate Pokemon Sword and Shield, but then defend Pokemon Scarlet and Violet? I don't get it. I like Scarlet and Violet, but I don't think they're better than Sword and Shield. Graphically, Sword and Shield are some of the best looking Pokemon games ever. Even better than Pokemon Colosseum and Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. Not the whole game necessarily. People have certainly pointed out enough times that the trees look like they have N64 textures. But forget the wild area for a sec. The towns look so good in Sword and Shield. And I think it's a real disservice to discredit them just because certain sections of the game, primarily in the wild area, don't look that great. Some of the 2D games looked really good, but 3D games just allow for so much more. So many different camera angles, so much freedom. I don't really want to go back to 2D, unless there's a really compelling reason for doing so. Like say, I don't know, having all the regions and Pokemon back in one game? Scarlet and Violet don't look nearly as good as, frankly, most of the games in the series. At least for the majority of the game. We'll get back to that later. Scarlet and Violet are Pokemon games. You know the drill. You get a starter, you have a rival or three, you collect gym badges while defending the region from an evil or maybe just misunderstood organization, you beat the Elite Four, but this time it's open world. There are these things called gym trials before the gyms now, but they're all pretty quick and forgettable. And there are a few Titan Pokemon that you can fight, but in the last set of games, Sword and Shield, any Pokemon could be a Titan Pokemon. Every Pokemon game since X and Y has had a major gimmick that most of the advertising is centered around for some reason. Dynamax and Gigantamax Pokemon were cool if you like kaijus. They were really slow, but I like the way they exploded when you defeated them. Terrestrializing and Z-moves were easily the weakest of the gimmicks. Terrestrializing is slow, and the explosions when you defeat them aren't as cool as the ones from Dynamaxing. Also, turning huge was way cooler than wearing a stupid sparkly hat. And Z-moves? You just do a little dance. And then the attack is a little better than normal. Mega Evolutions were easily the best gimmick. Even though most of the Pokemon that got Mega Evolutions were really popular Pokemon that didn't need them, and the ones that really could have used a power boost didn't get them, but they were interesting. Every Pokemon that got one got a completely new design, potentially with new typing and new moves. It was the best of both worlds. They should have just stuck with Mega Evolution and called it a day. I feel like the only way they could top that as far as gimmicks go is if they made Pokemon Fusion a real thing. But that would also be opening up a whole nother can of worms, which I don't think the series is quite ready for just yet. But getting back to Scarlet and Violet, the glitches. So many glitches. Nothing totally game-breaking that I've encountered, but there's something in virtually every play session. There can be a ton of frame rate drops depending on where you are on the map and how much is currently going on screen. Every single cutscene transition has a white line going down the left side of the screen vertically. This seems like such a little thing that should have been relatively easy to fix. The game has been out for over a year now and received 2 DLC packs. How has this not been patched yet? And then there are little things that may not qualify as glitches, but just as weird visual quirks. Like how NPCs will just fade out of existence after a while if you try to stand in front of them while they're walking. Sometimes if you stand next to a wall and zoom the camera in, the entire screen will just flicker white for seemingly no reason. I love the open world format, but I feel like that's the game's only saving grace. Everything else is such a major step back. There are only a handful of buildings in the entire game you can go inside of, and there's no indication anywhere of which ones those are. Most of the building designs are plain and boring. Most of the towns look kind of the same. There are a ton of shops that you can access exclusively from the front door, but for some reason the only thing they sell is meals and sandwich ingredients. So many pointless meals. I don't know about you guys, but I personally found no reason to buy any of these meals from all of the different restaurants in the game during my entire playthrough. It just seemed pointless. There are very few people in the game you can talk to compared to previous games. Most of them just have these dialogue bubbles above their head, essentially saying what they're thinking. This isn't necessarily a bad thing since Pokemon NPCs don't exactly have a great history of useful things to say, but it would have been nice if there were a few more noteworthy NPCs in the game outside of the main characters and gym leaders. For example, they could let us stumble upon the person who runs the PC system in this region, have them explain how we're able to access the Pokemon boxes from anywhere now instead of just from a computer. They do have some characters at the school that will sometimes have interesting things to say, like the school nurse. She's a non-main character that you can potentially end up forming a little bit of a bond with, but you never really have any reason to go back there to talk to her, or the rest of the people at the school. I think it would have made a lot more sense to have the more interesting characters scattered over the world that you're actively exploring, rather than having them all concentrated in 1 or 2 places. They reuse the same lame character models over and over again. Previous games did this too, but these are some of the blandest looking characters we've had in a mainline Pokemon game. And that even extends to the main characters to an extent. The 3 main characters, Nemona, Penny, and Arven, they're alright. But I got so sick of seeing Director Cavill's stupid face. And Gita, don't even get me started on her. That hair. And then you spend the entire DLC with the two most unlikable characters. Carmine and Kieran are almost as obnoxious as I am. I had to say that because I did a poll on which characters you guys like the most in Scarlet and Violet, and surprisingly, people really like Carmine. I'm sorry, I just wasn't a big fan of her. The outfits in Pokemon Scarlet Violet also leave a lot to be desired, and without the DLC, you're stuck to nothing but a school uniform, which again is another downgrade for the series as a whole. They made this huge leap forward in trainer customization in Sword and Shield, but then lost all of that in Scarlet and Violet for some reason, at least with the clothes. It is nice how many hairstyles and facial features they give you to choose from. The battle camera could also use some improvement, at least for wild encounters. It's pretty good for trainer battles, but only sometimes? Not sure why that is. The camera just seems really inconsistent, and I think that's primarily due to being able to enter a battle without transitioning to a separate battle arena. But Pokemon Legends Arceus did it perfectly. They should have just taken the camera from that and copied it over here. There are a lot of great changes that Legends Arceus did that they need to bring back in whatever the next Pokemon game is. Not just the battle camera, but being able to move your character around in battle to see the characters from any angle would be nice, even if it's just an aesthetic thing. And more importantly, the speed of the battles in Legends Arceus was so much better. Weather and status effects in that game were so much more well done. The turns went by so quickly it was seamless. In Scarlet and Violet, we went back to the same slow, monotonous turn-based structure. It's raining, it's snowing, the sunlight is harsh, there's a sandstorm, so-and-so is burned, so-and-so is affected by poison. We get it already. Just show us a quick animation and get on with it. At least the Terror Raids are a huge step up from the Max Raid battles in Sword and Shield. Max Raids were kind of fun, but they took so long. 4-on-1 battles took an absurdly long time for everyone to take their turns individually, but thankfully everyone can attack at the same time now, making the raiding process like a million times better. At least once you're finally able to get into a raid. I don't know why, but for some reason I had a much easier time entering raids in Sword and Shield. It seems like at least half the time I tried to do a raid in Scarlet and Violet, the connection times out, or I get an error notice, or the game just says, nope, sorry, and I have no idea why. The music's kinda lacking for most of the game too. Listen to this battle. This might be a me thing, like most of the topics in this review, but I prefer the day and night systems that are based on your real-time clock rather than just an in-game timer. It's just more immersive to me when I'm playing at night and it's nighttime in the game, or I'm playing during the day and it's daytime in the game. At least the wild area in Sword and Shield ran off a real-time clock, but the day and night cycles just seem to go by so fast in Scarlet and Violet, and I can't just go in knowing what time it'll be in the game. I have to wait until it's that time of the day in the game. And I just find that kind of annoying. Another little thing, I have a habit of mashing B after people are done talking in Pokemon games, because it always takes a while for the text boxes to close after they're done saying what they're saying. But if you do that in Scarlet and Violet, you crouch immediately after you're done talking to them, which is just a little bit of a pain to get out of because the animation is kind of slow. I would have preferred the crouch mapped to the left analog stick press or something, or they could just get rid of it. I basically never used the crouch feature in the game. It felt good to sneak up on Pokemon in Legends Arceus, but this time around I just found it sort of pointless because of the way the battle system works compared to the one in Legends Arceus. At least you can make sandwiches. That's a plus, I guess. I also like that you can have your Pokemon remember moves at any time. Getting rid of the move tutor was long overdue. And the movement outside of battle is pretty fast. I can see why they made most trainer battles optional this time around. In contrast to the speed of everything outside the battles themselves feel so slow this time around, particularly when there are status effects or weather effects or held items being used on the field. It just takes forever for anything to happen. I also feel like the difficulty was perfect in Scarlet and Violet, though I don't think I've ever really had an issue with Pokemon games being too easy or too difficult. That's the nice thing about Pokemon, you can kind of set your own difficulty depending on what Pokemon you choose, how often you swap them out, how much you grind in between gyms, and how many rare candies and other items you choose to give them. There's a virtually infinite amount of ways you can choose to play each game, which is a big part of the reason I still love most of these games today. I love that your Pokemon can run around in the overworld with you, and I love the auto battle feature. Pokemon following behind you should really be a series staple, and I'm glad it more or less has become one in recent years. I'm kinda thinking auto battle should become a series staple now too, because it works just so well for lower level Pokemon that you don't want to have to go through the whole rigmarole of a normal battle with. I like this little dance that the Team Star members do occasionally, even if it is kind of weird how expressionless they are while doing it. Now it's time for the spoiler section. Click away now if you haven't reached the end of the game and care about in-game spoilers. Area 0 is so cool. By far the best looking area in the game, and by far the best music in the game. Basically the best everything. They take away your motorcycle Pokemon, which kind of makes the gameplay better too, because it forces you to look around and take in the scenery, rather than just zooming past everything on your bike. The player character by themselves is just slow enough to where you can really stop and take everything in when you feel like it, and just fast enough so that it doesn't feel too tedious to get from place to place. All of the items and Pokemon scattered all about really help with this too. It just feels like there's always something to do here, at least until you've caught all the Pokemon on the map. It's cool having your NPC friends running alongside you too, commenting on the world around you. Granted, it would be nice if there was voice acting, and you didn't have to read the on-screen text while you're moving around trying to enjoy the scenery, but I'll take what I can get. The story also gets so wacky out of nowhere. It was out of left field for them to include the real climax of the game after the Elite Four, rather than before it. I think this is the first time in a Pokemon game that's happened. The Delta episode in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire doesn't count. But I like how you go from being some random kid doing school assignments and battling in clubs involving Pokemon to suddenly exploring a mysterious crystal cavern with Pokemon from the future brought there in a time machine made by your friend's dad who's dead, but also now an AI-controlled robot. It's so wacky, but if Pokemon's gonna lean into the story elements of their games, I'd rather have these bizarre twists and turns on an interpersonal level, rather than the generic, oh no, they're gonna take over the world with the power of the legendary Pokemon cliche. Either that or just have little to no story, like in the original Red and Blue version. Either way works for me. It's a shame the Hidden Treasure of Area 0 DLC doesn't really keep up the wackiness from Area 0. The DLC in Scarlet and Violet was really disappointing to me compared to the DLC from Sword and Shield. Like I mentioned earlier, you hang out with the two most unlikable characters the whole time, while doing relatively mundane things like going to the cultural festival, catching a lame legendary Pokemon, joining a foreign exchange program, going back to the same area you went to in the postgame, but a little deeper this time, catching another lame legendary Pokemon. There are 4 different biomes in the second half of the DLC that are kind of cool. And if you thought the main game was too easy, then this will definitely address your concerns. The Indigo Disc DLC can be legitimately difficult, even if your Pokemon are near level 100. And it's neat that the school that you visit is located in Unova, and you get to hear a remix of the Unova battle themes. This has got to be hinting at Gen 5 remakes, right? And the epilogue in Scarlet and Violet was fun. It was beyond silly, but it was fun. I like the Mochi dance, and the Mochi song. Possibly the best song in the game. So that's Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Kind of a mixed bag. I played Pokemon Violet, and I did still enjoy it despite all the criticisms I had, but I don't think it was this huge step up from Sword and Shield that many others seem to think it was. Maybe a small step up, or maybe just 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But let me know what you thought about the games in the comments, or just the future of the Pokemon series in general. Think we'll get a new mainline game this year? If we don't, it would be the first year without a mainline Pokemon game since 2015. Either way, I'm sure we'll find out soon. Thanks for watching.